Hello, friends, and thank you as always for visiting the LSU Dynasties YouTube channel, the YouTube home of Legends Sports Universe all-time dynasties all the time. This is going to be a very quick video. I posted about this on the channel. This is on my Facebook page rather than in a couple Facebook groups. This is a project I am working on as I try to bring the Legends Sports Universe Hockey League on the consoles for NHL 23 for the PS5. The goal here is to come up with a rating system to rate players throughout hockey history based on their actual performance, their actual stats. This is in no way targeting anybody or criticizing anybody in particular about how they do rosters, whatever. You know, if you're the person playing a game, you create it however you want to create it. But creating historical players tends to be a problem. And I feel like a lot of the times it's just kind of done willy-nilly by people, and as opposed to having a real basis for doing it. So the goal here is to create a formula by which you enter a player's name in, and they will spit out ratings to get that player to perform in the way that the player should perform. Obviously, you also have to adjust the game engine to the style of the game that you want to play, etc., etc. But here, I just kind of want to give you an idea of what this is supposed to achieve when it is done. It is still a work in progress. It's basically just a simple rating sheet. You'll see here, there's a few other spreadsheets that are hidden right now. But for our purposes, this is the main screen. You enter a player's name in here. You'll see Mike Bossy's name, my all-time favorite player, sitting in that slot. The only things that you will have to manually enter at that point are how many seasons he's played, which it gives you the age range that he played from, so you just have to kind of plug that data in there. So that would have been 10 seasons. You plug that in there. And then really just for the fighting skill rating, you have to go up to Hockey Fights, and you basically can enter a player's name, and they will give you a list of how many fights that player has been in, and you plug that into that square, and it will ultimately generate ratings throughout all the categories. So if you take a different player, let's just go and we'll put Wayne Gretzky in there just for the sake of doing so now. It would help if I typed his name correctly. This is what happens when you go live. All right, so 1938, 19 include the years there. Gretzky, I'm assuming Gretzky had like two. We'll give him 2 fights just for the sake of saying so. Although, well, let me show you how that site works. So we'll see here. We'll type in Gretzky. I'm guessing it's going to be 1 or 2 if he even had one. I'm sure he did at some point. Right? So it gives you 2 fights while he was with the Edmonton Oilers. So you enter 2 into that, and this will give you all the ratings for him: deking, hand-eye passing, puck control, all the shooting ratings. There's no real good way from a stats-based, formula-based kind of thing to separate slap shot ratings as opposed to wrist shot ratings. So rather than just make something up and act like I can create a real difference there, I'm not going to worry about that. The ratings are the same for both of them. Defense, defensive awareness, face-offs, shot blocking, etc. You guys know what all these ratings are. So now I'm just going to show you a little bit. It will also show you up here. Obviously, it gives you his position. It gives you what type of player he will be based on his ratings. It will give you his role. I actually have to adjust that because actually he should be franchised. So I have to adjust this base stat. I was getting some that were too high, and now it's kind of getting a little bit too low. So I've got to kind of adjust that to fit that better. But he would be a franchise in that one. I won't fix that now because we won't worry about that at this point. And the confidence is basically how appropriate I feel like the ratings are going to be. So this base is based on a player's what Hockey Reference has. We'll bring you up here real quick. So we'll see. This is just the last player I did for the LSUHL, Michael Roosevelt. But if you go down there, you'll see a player has something called point shares. If you're familiar with baseball at all, the concept of win shares is something that Bill James created for baseball as evaluating a player's contribution to a team. So Hockey Reference has this as point shares, which is basically their version of that. So the base is kind of based off of that. And then the overall, I did not create that overall computation. That's from a guy, and I posted his name the other day on Facebook, and I will give him proper credit again when I do the longer video going through everything. But he had created this just as a means of you plug in his, you typed in the numbers here, and it told you an overall. So basically, if you wanted to build a player, say you wanted to build a 92 defenseman, and you entered stuff in here, it would then give you the overall will continue to change so that you could kind of build the guy. But I liked the layout of this because it's very clean, it's very simple, but still I was borrowing his sheet, so I do want to give him credit. But all the formulas have been entirely redone. So to give you an idea of where this is pulling stuff from, I've got 3 hidden sheets here. So we're going to go look at this first one. This is basically, I've mentioned more than 2,000 players worth of data throughout history. This can be obtained, what is it? It is 2,363 position players through NHL history from 1967 to the present. This list includes every player who has played at least 250 games in the NHL and has positive point shares for their career. So really, if there's anybody who's over 250 in games played and doesn't make this list, they're basically a goon. And for my purposes, I'm not going to end up utilizing those guys anyway, and I feel like they could skew the ratings a little bit, so I just kind of left them off. Like a guy like a Mick Vukota, that kind of a guy, doesn't appear on this list. But still, it's more than 2,000 players throughout the history, and you'll see all the stats that they have, their goals, assists, that should be plus minus, that's an Excel error, penalty minutes, even shorthanded goals, game-winning goals, all the way down the line here, point shares, adjusted goals and adjusted assists, which basically puts all players relative to their era to try to equate guys from high offensive eras to guys in low offensive eras and get them all on the same playing field. Next, on the hidden sheet list, we will bring up this one. This is where the numbers kind of get computed in kind of an ugly fashion. But you'll see we work off of rankings throughout NHL history. So you get adjusted goals per game for the player. That ranks, so we're on Gretzky here. His adjusted goals per game in NHL history ranks 25th of more than 2,000 players. That puts him in the 98.9th percentile there. That yields a 97 rating for that category. Adjusted assists, the same thing. He's the second highest in NHL history. I'm actually not sure who the first one is. But so we do that for all these different categories. Now, you're going to see some of these things here with NA, hits per game, blocks per game, because those stats weren't tracked in Gretzky's era. So the ratings for Gretzky can only work off of the data that we have. Now, let's go and bring in a more modern player. Let's take a Connor McDavid, and we'll enter him in here. We'll go 7 seasons. For the sake of argument, we're not going to look for fights. We're just going to say that McDavid has 2. So now if you go down to that ugly data sheet, now you'll see goals per assists, takeaways per minute, giveaways per minute, hits per game, blocks per game. All of those things are populated also. So now, for Connor McDavid's ratings, all of that data can get factored. So you'll see, like the face-off rating is actually based off of what a player actually did, instead of just doing guesswork. So if you scroll down here, and again, this is all this kind of ugly data collection, which is why I hide the sheet. Thank you very much, Jim. I really appreciate that. So, like, now, here are all those 2,000 players scrolling down there with all of their data converted now into ratios so that I can use stuff and judge these guys accordingly in these formulas. The reason that we're going with ratios as opposed to just raw numbers is for like playing time and stuff like that. You know, your guys on your first line are always going to get more shots and all that kind of stuff. And role players, if you just go a given stat per game, role players are always going to have lower ratings. But role players are role players for a reason. They're probably role players because there's something that they're really good at. And then it's just a matter of you implementing those players properly. So when you go, either per game in some things like point shares and goals and whatever, but per minute on something like face-offs or blocks, something along that line, now you're giving those lesser players an opportunity to get a higher rating in the things they're good at while not overrating them. One of the big things that happens, I think, when a lot of people do individual ratings, but also just from what NHL does in releasing its game, is it's like, all right, well, this guy's an 87, so we're going to make him like an 87 across the board, even in things that he's not really good at. The number of forwards and wingers that I see with high 80s, like blocked shot ratings, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen. It maybe in a very, very rare exception. But, you want differentiation in a player. An 87 player doesn't mean that guy's an 87 in everything. He probably has some things where he's a 90, and he probably has some things that are less important to his position where he's like a 65 or a 70. So that's what this is really going to attempt to achieve. And let me see, what is that? I'm trying to remember what my third sheet is. Again, this was really crudely done. I probably should have mapped out how I was going to do this live thing beforehand. Oh, okay. So here's the new stats. So it's a separate spreadsheet from that first one that you saw, because this one is only based on players since the new data came into play from 2008 to the present. So now you've got stuff like Corsi and Fenwick, which I don't really use here because I feel like more conventional data and raw stats kind of get the job done more than those things do. But you'll see face-off percentage, hits, blocks, takeaways, giveaways, all these things that you don't have for the older players. I didn't want to ignore them because we have that data for more modern players. So we're going to use that data for the players we have, and for the older players, then we're just going to use like the point shares to kind of give you an idea of productivity of that player in his career. So that's going to be the goal here. Again, you're just going to plug in the name, you're going to plug in the seasons, you're going to plug in the fights, really just to get that fighting skill data correct, and it's going to spit out ratings for you for everybody. Again, more than 2,000 players through history. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. If you have any questions about what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, how something in particular is calculated and stuff like that, feel free to drop those in the comments. I will do, once this is done, I will do a longer kind of live stream for people to kind of come in and see what we're doing, ask questions on the fly and stuff like that. But I just want to do this real quick one just to give you an idea of what we're trying to accomplish here. I want to see if there's anything else that I can show. I'll basically save it for the next one. Like I said, you want your guys, a lot of the categories that I'm really focused on in this are getting the face-offs right, getting the shot blocking right, getting the awarenesses right. You have guys who were not particularly good defensive players, and you'll see them get turned out with, because he's a 95, well, now his defensive awareness can't possibly be less than a 90. That's nonsense. Of course it can. So, it's just trying to make sure that players have a differentiation between their own skills so that they really play like the player and they feel like the player. That is the goal. That is always the goal of doing this. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. Again, I apologize. I probably should have. I just decided a few minutes ago that I was going to go and do this. I probably should have mapped it out a little bit more, which I will do for when it's ultimately released, and I'll map out the video a little bit better. But for now, this is again just to give you the glimpse. I appreciate you watching. Kindly subscribe if you have not as of yet. For one thing, you'll need to subscribe to comment in like future live videos and stuff like that, and give a like to the Legend Sports Universe Facebook page as well. And you can kind of keep up to date on this and all my other projects going on there. I hope you guys are good. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be good to each other, and we'll talk soon.